Time zones can be very complicated. There are so many oddities throughout the world. Whether it be a small Pacific island nation that uses a time zone of UTC plus 14, even though the logical limit is plus 12, a certain Asian nation that spans a potential 5 time zones yet chooses to only use 1, or the various countries or regions within countries that refuse to use a time zone to the nearest hour. Looking at a time zone map of the world shows just how messed up things really are. Time zones are actually a fairly recent thing and were only made necessary with the advancement of technology, specifically the railroads. Previously, each individual town and city had its own local time based on the sun, but the need to coordinate with other locations made time zones a necessity. Of course, advancements in technology have not only continued but accelerated since the end of the 19th century, and with the ever-connected world that we live in the 21st century, the age of the internet, some have come to question the usefulness of time zones. Do we even need time zones? Couldn't the whole world just live on one universal time zone? It would be the same time for everyone, all the time, everywhere. It may sound like a radical concept, but it is something that several people have made an interesting case for, especially within the last 5 years or so. Now, first and foremost, it's important to note that nobody is suggesting that certain people flip their lives entirely, sleeping during the day and working at night, while the lucky ones in other parts of the world get to stick to a normal day-night cycle. Instead, society would continue to base its sleeping pattern around the sun of their location and merely shift the time to sync up with the rest of the planet. So people in Australia might end up waking up at 8 PM instead of 7 AM. Sure, it would be weird at first, but people would get used to it. After all, the numbers are fairly arbitrary anyway, right? Getting up at 6 PM may sound weird, but why? It doesn't have to be. So what would be the potential societal benefits to adopting such a system? Well, the superficial advantages of this kind of setup are obvious. For starters, no more needing to coordinate time zones every time you travel or speak to someone in a different time zone. An 8 o'clock phone call in New York would also be an 8 o'clock phone call in Vienna. The big benefit of abolishing time zones would be flexibility. Businesses and individuals could have more freedom to plan their days. In a world where the traditional 9 to 5 is becoming less and less common, a single time zone for everyone could facilitate a move towards a more suitable working schedule for many people. This would also have the added societal benefit of less traffic. With staggered start times ranging across several hours, rush hour in the morning would be less stressful and chaotic, with fewer people all trying to get to work at the exact same time. This would also allow many workers to access services that they otherwise would not be able to with the current system, like going to the bank for example. Typically banks are only open during business hours, so someone who works those same business hours would be unable to find a suitable time to go into their local branch. A visit to the bank could become much easier to many people. It should probably go without saying that in a world without time zones, there would also be no daylight saving time either. However, workdays could be shifted at different times during the year to better suit the seasonal movement of the sun. This would effectively function like DST, but without the awkwardness of having to lose an hour in spring and gain an hour in the autumn. Of course, some might argue that this might create all the same problems that DST does, but if the idea is to move away from the 9 to 5 workday, then this wouldn't be an issue. It could be at the discretion of the company, institution, or person to decide what works best for them. Another advantage of this increased flexibility is the fact that the idea of the 9 to 5 workday isn't even something that's universal. So many different countries have different workdays, and many people within those countries don't even follow the cultural norms. Take Spain for example and the siesta. While this may be something that's becoming less common these days, it is still something to take into consideration. The country's normal hours for eating dinner also vary massively from most of the Western world. In much of Europe and North America, eating dinner at 6 or 7 PM may be perfectly normal, but this would be considered incredibly early for a Spaniard who might not have dinner until 10 or even 11 PM. With all that being said, if two people working for the same company in different time zones even both have a 9 to 5 workday, those 9 to 5s are going to be at different times anyway. Different people and different companies have different needs and responsibilities, so having more flexibility will have more of an upside than simply being in sync with the local population. Now, on the other hand, there is obviously a very strong case that can be made against the abolishment of time zones. Time zones may be complicated, but many of the so-called problems that a universal time zone would solve could in most cases be solved in other, far less drastic ways, and in some cases may actually exacerbate the problems instead. Let's first start by looking at international calling. Without time zones, time is never ambiguous, but how do we know at what time it would be appropriate to call another country? What if I want to call my uncle in Australia? Should I call now at 2 PM? It's the same time everywhere, but then again, the sun just rose a couple of hours ago, so I don't really know. The numbers we use at the moment may seem arbitrary, but they're actually not. 12 noon is roughly when the sun is at its highest point and therefore the middle of the day. Yes, this varies by region quite a lot in some places, but at the very least it's a good rule of thumb. Moreover, this gives us context to other times of the day. 2 AM, most people are probably asleep. 1 PM, lunchtime. 8:30 AM, rush hour, might be a good time to avoid the roads if you can. Imagine getting off a plane in a foreign country. It's dark. Okay, what time is it? 4 PM. Well, that's not very helpful. Is the sun about to rise? Or maybe it just sets? Is it the middle of the night or early evening? Time that is independent of the movement of the sun of the current location loses all of its meaning. Further context will always be needed to know what time of day it actually is. Now, being aware of cultural differences is good in all aspects of life, and this goes for time zones too. However, in no society around the world is it normal to get up at 1 PM, start work at 2, come home at 10 and go to bed at 5 AM. Yes, there will always be shift workers and people with irregular schedules, but society as a whole fits its days around the sun. In this sense, the flexibility argument of getting rid of time zones has one big weakness. It may be true that 9 to 5 is becoming less common, but it would be naive to think that it's not still important. It's how businesses coordinate and how parents can take their kids to school in the morning. By getting rid of time zones, we'll just have a new 9 to 5 in many places. It doesn't in itself create flexibility. So for example, if the sun rose at 2 PM and the banks opened at 4, wouldn't other businesses just open at 4 as well? The standard workday would just end up functioning as a de facto time zone for the region, but with the added difficulty of having to work out how to fit your day around it. It would also be confusing for people who are not locals of that area because there would be no universal standard. On the extreme end of possibilities, you might end up with a worldwide version of the situation they currently have in Western China. While the government in Beijing has mandated their local time to be the one official time zone for the entire country, large parts of the western portion of the country now use an unofficial time zone so that their days are more in sync with the sun. It's not inconceivable that different regions of the world would just adopt their own local, unofficial time zones if we got rid of the official ones. Ultimately, the benefits of time actually having a relatable and universal context is far more important than having a universal time. Besides, flexibility can be achieved without the need to ditch time zones. If a company wants its employees to come in at 10 instead of 9, well, they can do it. There's nothing stopping them. Another problem that's slightly less obvious would be the days of the week, and words like today and tomorrow. Assuming we used UTC, this problem would only exist in parts of the world far away from the prime meridian, but it would be a big one. With current methods, a solar day and a calendar day are more or less in sync, regardless of the location. At 12 AM, the day changes from Monday to Tuesday, and this is, by definition, the middle of the night. Now, if we imagine a country like New Zealand, which has its time zones completely flipped, suddenly today and tomorrow lose a lot of their meaning. Sleeping would be common in the middle of the calendar day, and Monday would pass into Tuesday in the middle of the workday. If you arrive at work at 9 PM and your boss asks for a report by tomorrow, does he mean it like 1 AM, or does he mean by 9 PM the next day, the start of the next workday? Days of the week would completely lose all meaning. Work days would be Monday, Tuesday to Friday, Saturday, with Saturday, Sunday, Sunday, Monday being the weekend. Aside from the obvious day-to-day confusion this would cause, there's also the added confusion of holidays or religious days, and when would New Year be celebrated? In the middle of the afternoon? But hypothetical problems aside, there are also more real, practical problems too. Getting the entire globe to adopt a single time zone simply wouldn't happen. Remember, there are still countries in the world that have chosen not to adopt the metric system. But it certainly wouldn't just be the US that would be a problem. Good luck convincing China, Russia, India, Japan and Australia to adopt the same time zone. So even if a world without time zones would be beneficial, it just wouldn't be feasible anyway. Having a universal time zone in certain specific circumstances does make sense, for example in aviation. This is why all pilots and air traffic controllers use UTC, because absolute precision is needed and a complete lack of ambiguity is paramount. So in this sense, we already do have a universal time, we just only use it when we need it. There's no doubt that time zones as they exist today are overly complex and needlessly convoluted, but this doesn't mean that we should get rid of them altogether. Countries should work together to make time zones simpler and strive to make them as logical as possible. Getting rid of time zones that are not to the nearest hour should be the first change, and we can take it from there. Time zones are far from perfect, but so long as humans live in different parts of the world, it looks like we're stuck with them. Now, for the second section of this video, I'm going to look at the question, do we really need daylight saving time? Once again, this video is sponsored by Dashlane, the simple and secure way to store and fill passwords. Dashlane is a password manager that safely stores your passwords so you don't have to remember them all, allowing you to log into your accounts in a matter of seconds. All of your passwords are encrypted, so only you can see them, and if you ever want to change a password, or all of them, this can be done with a click of a button without having to visit individual websites. Dashlane is available to download for free on Android, iOS, Windows and Mac. Just go to dashlane.com/wonderwhy. That'll let them know that you came from this video, which really helps support the channel. Dashlane also has a premium version which also offers a VPN, dark web monitoring and can be synced across unlimited devices. You can get 10% off premium using the offer code WONDERWHY. Thanks again to Dashlane for supporting this channel, and thanks to you for watching.